Obviously, as you're seeing on the news, attacks are still happening in Kyiv. People are still dying in Kyiv, right in the center of Kyiv, even. But how people go about their lives with this kind of thing hanging over them, you'll be very surprised at how quickly these kinds of things become normal. But again, look, Britain is a country that survived the Blitz, so it's
Yeah,
not like we don't have any idea about that. But
absolutely.
you just have to understand that mentality, that spirit exists here among the Ukrainian people too.
While the world was enjoying New Year's celebrations yesterday, Ukrainians were given an abrupt reminder of their nation's conflict with Russia. Just hours into 2025, Moscow launched a drone strike on the capital, Kyiv, killing 2 people and wounding at least 6 others. For the latest, let's bring in Oz Katerji, who's been reporting on the war from Kyiv. Good afternoon, Oz.
Good afternoon.
Thanks so much for joining us. What can you tell us about this latest attack, Oz?
Well, yeah, it's important to understand these attacks are daily, they're routine. Obviously, when they hit Kyiv, they make more news, but these attacks happen in Kherson. 2 people were killed in Kherson over the last 24-hour period, too. But yeah, these drone strikes regularly, routinely target civilian areas. And even when they're intercepted, as most of them were, over the last 24-hour period, they can still cause massive damage, as some of the videos and photos you've probably seen from the last 2 days or so of the damage, particularly in the Kyiv, the central district, killing two scientists in their home, a married couple who are working at the Taras Shevchenko University. So look, these are routine attacks, daily attacks. That's why the issue of air defense has always been so important and high up on Kiev's agenda, because these drones are daily, and without the air defenses to shoot down these objects, more people will die.
Yeah. Oz, I know what you're saying is absolutely right. I was in Kyiv last summer, and there are multiple airstrikes every day, and multiple air raid sirens every day. What I was surprised by was how much of I guess a sort of fatigue with those air raid sirens in Kyiv, and people not necessarily responding to all of them, and then warnings that potentially there could be losses of life. We have seen an upscaling of the attacks on Kyiv. Are people now responding more urgently when there are air raid sirens?
I mean, look, that's a difficult question to talk about, because you have to understand that after nearly 3 years of war now, that these kinds of things become normalized. And there are people who drop everything and go into shelters as soon as they hear an air raid siren. There are people who ignore every single air raid siren. So, it's hard to gauge what the kind of median response is from all of that. Mostly, I see people not responding to them too much. But I live in the center of Kyiv. You go to some places, Kherson, Kharkiv. It's very different to how people respond to these things, and because the level of risk is much larger in those cities than it is in Kyiv. Obviously, as you're seeing on the news, attacks are still happening in Kyiv. People are still dying in Kyiv, right in the center of Kyiv, even. But how people go about their lives with this kind of thing hanging over them, you'll be very surprised at how quickly these kinds of things become normal. But again, look, Britain is a country that survived the Blitz, so it's
Yeah,
not like we don't have any idea about that. But
absolutely.
you just have to understand that mentality, that spirit exists here among the Ukrainian people too.
Absolutely. I'd like to talk about this, the other story about Moscow cutting off gas supply routes through Ukraine. Is there any way, I mean, this is going to affect Europe inevitably, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's Ukraine that's ended the deal. The deal was worth about $5 billion to Russia every year, and it was worth about $800 million to Ukraine every year. It provided about 5% of the gas supplies coming into Europe as a whole. That's now gone. There's only one route for Russian gas into Europe now. That's the Turk Stream pipeline. But that goes through Turkey. So I don't think there's going to be any reversing in the Ukrainian position on this. As to how it's going to affect Europe, it's going to particularly affect countries like Slovakia, Hungary, and Austria, who were relying on, who were using that pipeline for their domestic energy needs. But it's also going to have an effect on Moldova and the breakaway Russian-sponsored breakaway region of Transnistria. I think the impact is going to be felt much more severely there than it is going to be felt in Europe, which has managed to unhook itself largely from Russian gas. There is a diplomatic issue between the leader of Hungary and the leader of Slovakia, between them and Kyiv about this, because they are, in my opinion anyway, quite pro-Putin and quite pro-Russia. So it informs their perspective more than the risk of major energy problems in Europe. I think it will probably drive prices up a little bit, but nothing compared to what we saw at the beginning of 2022.
Yeah. Oz, we're approaching the third anniversary of the full-scale invasion. We're also approaching rapidly Trump's inauguration. How soon do you think we might really see Kyiv and Moscow brought to the negotiating table? He's promised he will end it in a day. What does it feel like from your position on the ground there? What will happen after January the 20th?
Well, I mean, look, anyone who's listening to what the governments in Kyiv and the dictatorship in Moscow are saying, you can't look at what those statements are and then look at what Trump's saying and think, oh, sure, these guys are going to sit down and hash it out anytime soon. I think the idea that the Trump administration is going to be able to broker a peace deal anytime soon is frankly absurd. It's a preposterous idea. Based on the fact that neither Russia nor Ukraine's not willing to give up its sovereignty or its territory, quite rightly so, and it views the war not as one for territory, but over people's lives. And we've seen how Moscow governs over these occupied Ukrainian territories. Whenever they're kicked out of areas, we uncover the mass graves. So this is an existential fight for Ukraine, and the idea that they're going to just suddenly give in is just completely divorced from reality. And the statements coming from Russia at the moment are still completely maximalist in their aims. They want nothing more than to redraw the borders of Europe and to completely undo the security architecture that exists in Europe. And they want to do so they can bully and threaten and expand towards their neighbors' territory. So I think that even if Trump wanted to push this through, I think it's really seriously time for European leaders to have a conversation about what kind of Europe they want to raise their grandchildren in, because one in which the borders have been forcibly redrawn by an expansionist, revanchist dictatorship is something that we should have finished with in the 20th century.
Thank you so much for your time this afternoon, Oz. That's Oz Katerji, who's a reporter in Kyiv.